Happy Wednesday, my friends. Mary Rose here, and it is 1 p.m. Pacific time, the special magic hour where we get to gather, talk about story structure, writing craft, the mindset of the working writer, all our favorite topics. I hope you're all doing well. I hope that those of you that are in a NaNoWriMo commitment are having a great experience. I hope you're still hard at work, finding your rhythm, working consistently, getting your goals met. It's very exciting. For those of you who are new to this live stream, hello, I'm Mary Rose Wood, and I'm an author myself. That's where my sense of authority comes from. I don't just, randomly grab a microphone and say, hey, I'm going to give advice about writing. No, writing is really complicated. You have to be kind of careful where you take your writing advice from, right? Because a lot of people give it. And sometimes it can be a little confusing when you hear contradictory things or advice given by people who maybe have never written a book. It happens more often than you would imagine. So, just so you know who I am, I've been an author for decades now. I've got 14 published novels out in the world. My most recent is Alice's Farm, A Rabbit's Tale, which is floating right there above my head on the bookshelf, above the fresh picked strawberries. It's a middle grade novel, and that's what I'm best known for. Oh, I love middle grade. Middle grade's it's a great place to focus on good storytelling because you have to be clear enough in order to engage a 10-year-old, but also have enough layers of meaning to write a book that is worthy to stand next to Charlotte's Web or The Hobbit, or so many middle grade classics that somehow seem to become part of the canon. They're not it's not a disposable category. It's really where the classic children's literature lives in so many ways. So that's who I am, and I would love to know who you are. This is a live stream, which means that I'm live, you're live. You have the opportunity to leave comments. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave comments where the comments are on YouTube, and if you're watching on Facebook, by all means, there's a link that you can click so that I can know who you are. And this is what it is, StreamYard.com/Facebook. It's right above where this video is playing. And that will reveal your name to me if you choose to leave a comment. And you can just say hello too. Let me know who's here and who's watching and where you're watching from. All right, today's topic. This was something that came up in a live stream that I did last week, and I promised that I would talk more about it. And it's the idea of finding dimension, multi-dimensional writing, finding dimension in your writing. So when we say dimension, right, we can get a little math nerdy for a hot second. Like the first dimension is like a line, and the second dimension is flatness. And then 3 dimension is when we pop up, right? Like the centerfold of a pop-up book, and we are in the world in all 3 dimensions. If you want to bring in your physicist friends, and they can talk to us about the 4th and 5th dimensions and onward, that's always an interesting conversation. But the difference between writing that feels flat and writing that feels like a real, fully embodied world is the difference between mediocre writing and really good writing. And so this idea of how we find that dimension, how we lift the words off the page and let them come to life in a real sense of reality, is very important to those of us that care about writing well. And that's what I want to talk about today. It's an interesting topic, and it has a lot of dimensions. Forgive the pun. It's a multi-dimensional answer because it's in a sense, what we're asking is what elevates writing to the level of being really good, right? So it's kind of a big question. So what I want to do today is not give an exhaustive training in all of this stuff, right? It's not possible for me to do that in this live stream. It is what I do in my program, which is called Path of the Storyteller. The topics that I'm going to touch upon today are the kinds of topics that each get their own in-depth lesson and exploration in that program. But if you there's a saying, right? You don't know what you don't know. And I do feel that there's a benefit to going through these. I have about a half a dozen to share with you today. Going through these techniques of writing craft, just so you can ask yourself, have I even heard of that before? Is that something that I consciously think about in my writing? Is that something I need to learn more about? Right? That can be really, really useful because you can go on a journey of exploration, or you can decide to pay attention in your reading and look for some of these qualities of good writing in the books that you read. And that will be a benefit to you. I know that it will. All right. So let me just take a moment to say hello to my friends in the comments. Terry, hi. I'm glad to see you here. Sarah, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. It's really nice to be talking live to you. And of course, if you're watching on the replay and you want to ask questions, comments, all that good stuff, do it in the assigned area below. And this way I'll know what was on your mind and I can answer you there. Okay. So let's talk about this idea of dimension. I think you probably know what I mean when I say that some writing just feels flat on the page. To me, the experience of reading that kind of writing is marked by um, it's boring. Like, it's just a little boring. It's not that it's unreadable, but it seems to take a lot of effort from the reader to keep going. It doesn't pull you along. It doesn't suck you in, right? It doesn't come to life in your mind in quite the same way. You can read it, you can follow what's happening, and often, if that type of flattish writing has a pretty good dramatic question, it's like got some kind of high stakes plot or a mystery. Many of us are stubborn enough. I speak for myself as a person who has a stubbornness as one of my traits, one of my strengths and weaknesses, as is so often the case in our personalities, right? Our strengths and weaknesses are often the same. Um, I'm determined and I'm stubborn, right? Depends on the word that you use. If we're stubborn enough and we're hooked by the dramatic question or the mystery or whatever it is, we'll read it to the end to find out what happens. It's not going to kill us. It's not like the end of the world. But this type of writing does not, it's not the best we can do. And it's not the kind of writing that takes our breath away. These are not the type of characters that feel like real people that we can sort of swear we met them. Like, I know that I've had lunch with Jane Eyre. I just know it. I know we're friends. We're friends in another dimension. These flat characters there's a kind of disposable quality. These are not necessarily the books that we would ever want to reread. We don't go back to them. So that's what I mean by flatness. It's perfunctory. It's serviceable. It may well get the job done. And there may be, books that you've read that are published that have that quality. They're okay. You got through it. It was entertaining. It kept you busy, but not the kind of books that you really feel changed by or that you feel become part of you. Whereas a truly dimensional writing has this quality. It has this quality of being a lived experience. Now, there was a literary theorist, also a well-respected novelist and important teacher of writing named John Gardner, who has a theory that I have probably mentioned before here. I talk about it a lot in the Path of the Storyteller program. It's called the fictional dream. And dream is a really interesting word, isn't it? Because if you're a vivid dreamer, as many people are, when you're having a dream, it feels like it's really happening. You may wake up from a vivid dream and have to reorient yourself, like, oh, no, it was just a dream. Oh no, I'm okay. I'm in my bed, So there's this vividness. The human mind is capable of creating this incredibly vivid internal experience, right? And so we fiction writers take advantage of that capacity of the human mind by using language to create a dream of our own devising and planting it in the mind of our readers. And if we do a really good, skillful job, the reader will experience it as something That's not just wasting time reading a kind of a bland book by running my eyes over words on the page and turning pages until I'm done, but as an experience, as something that actually happened to them. Now, super interesting neuroscience that supports this demonstrates that, in fact, the brain is not that good at determining the difference between experiences that it really is having and things that it's reading about. So the brain is designed to be a friend to fiction writers. The reader's brain is our friend. We have to learn how to operate the reader's brain, because that's really where the fruits of our labors as writers blossom. It's not on the page. It's what happens when our words get in the brains of our readers. So that's a kind of a foundational understanding that I want you to bear in mind as I talk through what the kinds of things that we can do to make our writing have that kind of dimension of reality in our readers. Okay. So first of all, what do these inexperienced or less experienced writers do, or less ambitious, I should say? You can have a lot of experience writing in a flat way. You can do it forever. That could just be the best that a person does. But it's this two-dimensional flatness. It has this sameness about it. It just kind of ticks along, and I like to use a good music comparison because music's important to me, and I think it's extremely useful for writers for these kinds of comparisons. Um, there's a quality in music, call it dynamics. When you listen to a piece of music or play a piece of music, if you're a musician, you don't always just play it like a machine, right? It's not like a metronome is started at the beginning and it ticks all the way through, and there's never a break in the rhythm. And you don't always choose a volume and play it at the same volume all the way through. I think for a minute about a piece of music that's really expressive, that really has that power to stir your emotions. It speeds up and it slows down, right? There are fast parts and slow parts. There are times when it almost hesitates and then it resumes its pace. Think about the volume, right? The loudness and softness. There are quiet parts and there are louder parts, and then there are big climactic crescendos where things get louder and something thrilling is happening and it makes you feel something in your body. This is dynamics in music, right? Some notes are hit staccato very sharply, and some are smooth and luxurious, and it sort of meant to blend in together. So anybody who's got any musical background knows what I'm talking about. These dimensions or these dynamics are used in combination as well. So sometimes we could be getting faster and louder at the same time, right? Or sometimes we can be getting softer and slower and at the same time. Each of these shifts in dynamics creates an emotional response. It communicates something. Music that is played by a machine, sounds like the theme on the ice cream truck as it drives by, right? It's just a little mechanical thing. It's not meant to raise emotions. It's just making noise. So that's a comparison. That's a comparison I want you to bear in mind. We don't want our writing to be flat and lacking in dynamics. We want it to have the quality of all of those expressive capacities that even can work together. So, what are those expressive capacities? Let's look at them. As I said, I've got 6. Um, the passage of time. We can be expressive in our writing by exploring the way we treat the passage of time. Now, I just used the image of tempo in music, and it's really very much the same thing. If our writing sets a metronome at the beginning and is moving at the same pace throughout the entire story, there is such a tedium to that. And yet, less experienced writers often do this. They don't distinguish between what's important and what's unimportant. They run their chronology of their narrative almost like the calendar of the main character. It's got a set amount of hours in a day, and they all have to be accounted for, and time just moves along at a very steady pace. Now, when we study story structure, which I hope that many of you have, or those of you who would like to, let me know about it, and we can certainly talk about that. You recognize that a story is not made out of all of the events of your hero's day, right? It's not made of the passage of their calendar. It's not their to-do list. It is meaningful events that have a kind of an archetypal energy that it's what stories are made of. The changes in your hero's condition, the circumstances that they begin, what happens to change their circumstances, the choices that are made, the outside assistance that may come to help them get over the threshold into a long second act of adventure. Like, there are things that happen that are important, really important. The story is made out of those things. What happens in between those things is not important. It's just not that important. So we don't have to labor over all the things that are not storytelling. So one technique for being dynamic with the passage of time is having some discernment about which are the crucial storytelling scenes of your tale, and telling those, bringing those into the timeline of your storytelling. And then things that are not those crucial scenes, receding them, compressing them, summarizing them, so that your storytelling, your writing, is basically made out of storytelling. The stuff that's not storytelling, the connective tissue, if you will, is simply not, you don't spend a lot of time on it. Now, that requires you to know which the big beats of storytelling are. And that's why I say I can't do a total comprehensive training on how to execute all of this stuff. But I want you to ask yourself, do you know what the really important beats of storytelling are in your narrative, in your hero's journey? Do you know what the big moments are, what the necessary scenes are? Or are you treating every incident as if it's of equal importance? So that's a good thing for you to think about. Now, here's another way to be dynamic in the passage of time. And I'm sure you've experienced this, right? Sometimes time seems to go very quickly, depending on what we're doing, what our mental state is. Sometimes it slows to a crawl, right? We experience time differently, depending on what's happening. You can do this too in your storytelling. You don't have to be realistic about the passage of time. If you watch a movie, I guess one famous example is The Matrix, right? Like, you can slow down the movement of the bullet, you can speed up the action, you can go into slow motion. You can do all of these things in your writing. You don't do them randomly, you do them with intention. You look at the incredible moment that you want to depict, and you say, I need to do this in slow motion because it's a super busy fight scene, and I want to make it really, really exciting. And in real life, it would take a second, but I'm going to break it down so that every moment of it is thrilling. One of my favorite fight scenes in literature is a scene from the Kipling short story, Rikki Tikki Tavi. Rikki is a mongoose who fights cobras, and there's a scene where he gets into this fight with this gigantic cobra, much bigger than he is, and he, locks his teeth into the back of the cobra's, neck, and is thrashed around, and it takes place in this kind of small space. It takes place in a bathroom, and it's a paragraph long, and it truly would be the kind of moment in real life that would be like a half a second. Mongoose pounces, bites, snake tries to shake him off. Like, it would happen in a blur. You wouldn't be able to see it. But there's this remarkable sort of long paragraph where every beat of Ricky's experience, it's like the observation that people see their life flash before their eyes, when they're about to expire. Ricky is in a life and death situation, and he does not think he's going to survive it. And so we get into his body. We are with him as he's thrashed back and forth. Things in the bathroom are knocked over. They go flying. Ricky takes a moment to ponder how he will be remembered by his family. I mean, it's just this incredible exploration of this moment where he is doing the thing that he, committed to do. He makes this heroic sacrifice. He does not think he's going to survive it. He does. It's not the end of the story. But the passage of time is an absolutely essential feature of how Kipling makes that scene so thrilling, because he slows down time. So here's my other question for you. Do you think about the passage of time, not just in terms of which scenes you include, but within scenes, in your hero's big moments, their moments of heightened emotion, greatest risk, um, whether they're savoring a moment of bliss or confronting their imminent demise? Do you think about how they're experiencing the passage of time? And are you using that dimension in your writing? Something to think about. Now, I mentioned physics earlier, and there are, in fact, some uh, topics in relativity that seem to relate to our writing craft, because I just talked about time, but now I want to talk about distance. Now, this is something that it is such a feature of very good writing, and it is such a kind of classic, common quality of flat, less skillful writing. The distance between the narration, right, and the events of the story can and should change. I'm going to explain that a little bit, because I know that if it's not something you've encountered before or thought about before as a writer, what I said probably doesn't make much sense. But so slow down and stay with me for a second. The words that you put on the page are creating an experience for your reader. Now, if you were showing your reader a movie, right, and you were the cinematographer of that film, and probably working closely with the director, making decisions about how close to put the camera to what is on the screen. If you watch any well-shot movie, you'll know that the camera is not fixed. The camera does not just stay at a regulation 12 feet from the actors and doesn't move. The movie cuts in close, sometimes really close, and it moves back, sometimes to a more medium distance, and then sometimes it pulls away back, and we might get a long view, a panoramic shot. Sometimes, you can create the effect of taking in an entire planet or zooming in on the dilating pupil of your main character and everything in between, right? So think of that, how that would work in a film. And I imagine it would not be difficult for you to picture that. Okay. Now, can we do the same thing as writers? Well, of course we can. Whatever you're describing on the page is what the fictional dream of your reader is going to incorporate. And if you describe the dilation of a pupil, then that's what your reader sees. They are in a tight close-up to the story, right? If you describe the vastness of a mountain range in the distance, that's what your reader sees. You've now given them the equivalent of a cinematic long shot. Now, think how much nicer of a dream your reader is going to have if you vary the distance of your shots. They will feel like they're watching a beautifully shot film. They're not going to feel like they're just chugging along at an unchanging medium distance. Now, flat writing, as you have already guessed, tends to chug along at an unchanging medium distance. It's not that the writer chooses that. In most cases, these are writers who simply don't think about which distance is optimal. They don't think about changing the distance. They simply depict in this somewhat mechanical way what happens. This happens, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens. But they don't make choices about how the reader's imagination, how that fictional dream is going to focus, the focal length, if you will, on what is being depicted. So you can totally do this with language. And now imagine for a moment the difference already in your reader's experience just from changing these two things. Instead of your story moving along at a steady pace, never speeding up, never slowing down, not really leaving out what's unimportant, not really giving special attention to what is important, right? That's going on in the dimension of time, and in the dimension of space, it's just never moving. It's just chugging along at this unchanging medium distance. That's flat writing. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I hope this is making sense. And if it's not and you have questions, please put them in the comments, because it would be wonderful to, to see some light bulbs going off for you guys. So you can use time and distance just the same way a musician will use tempo and volume to work together in creating a very, very expressive quality in the work. And it will contribute so much to your reader's experience. So those are two big ones. Here's another one. The quality of embodiment is often very underdeveloped in flat writing. What do I mean by embodiment? Your storytelling is from some point of view, right? It's a first person point of view. It's a third person point of view. Almost certainly it's one of those two. Even in a third person point of view, you will spend a lot of your time, I hope, writing from a close third person, where the even though it's a third person narrator, the viewpoint character is specific, and it will almost all of the time be your protagonist, your hero. So that means that the experience that you're putting into words is coming through a character. That character may be words on a page, but we don't want it to feel that way, do we? We want that character to feel like a living, breathing creature. We want it to come alive. We want it to leap from the flatness into a full three-dimensional experience for the reader. So that character has to have a body. It's not just a consciousness. You have to imagine the embodied experience of your character in order to include enough clues, enough details to make the fictional dream of your reader not just experience the character as an arrangement of words on the page, but as something made of flesh and blood, something that feels heat, cold, texture, something that gets hungry, something that's ticklish, the full embodied experience of being alive can be depicted in language in such a way that the character who, listen, we're writers, we know it, we're just making it up with and putting words on the page, but those words have the power to trick the reader's brain into letting that character spring to fully embodied life. Some of your most powerful tools for making this embodied quality work in the reader's brain is remembering that everybody's got senses, and that the information that we get from the outside world comes in through our senses, our sense of sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. If I write words that describe smelling a field of lavender, neuroscience has demonstrated, if I do a good job putting that sensory detail in words, but when it gets to the reader's brain, it's not just gonna activate their reading capacity, it's gonna light up the part of the brain that processes smells. And when the reader's brain is lighting up in the realm of the senses, The reader is experiencing the storytelling not as words on a page, but as something that they experienced because their sensory inputs are engaged. It is very virtual reality type model, if you will think of it that way. We're just doing it with language, but language has that capacity. If we use language with intention and we keep our the sensory inputs of our reader's brain in mind, we can play it. We can play it like a fiddle. So incorporating sensory detail in your writing is going to make the embodied quality really, really elevated, and your reader will feel like this. They'll feel it. They'll feel that this character comes to life. And this is true not only of your hero, but it's true of the world of your story. So the fourth technique that I would ask you to consider is to not just think of your hero as being embodied, but think of the entire world of your story as being specific and packed with detail. If that you don't have to describe everything in minutia, and this is actually kind of a mistake that less experienced writers make. They want their story to come to life, and so they think that if they just describe everything, that's going to do it. But that's not what's going to do it, because the story is being experienced by your hero. And so the setting of the story, just as in a dream, is packed with meaning in and of itself. It's not a neutral landscape, it's the environment in which this dream is taking place. So every object in it, every detail in it, every choice that you make, because guess what? It's all up to you, about the physical surroundings that your hero is in, is a chance to tell story and is a chance to bring your writing to life in the mind of the reader. So choose the details that give the feeling that you want you want the reader to have at this moment in the story. You can make a lot of choices about this. If you really remember how powerful the reader's brain is, they're going to bring this environment to life in their minds. It's not random. It's the experience that they're having. And so you want to be intentional about setting. You want to be intentional about the types of details that you include. There's one great example. And I love to use it, of course, because this is from Charlotte's Web, written by E.B. White, who was clearly one of the really, really top prose stylists in English of the 20th century. And his taste in writing influenced all of us, because most of us, at least everyone in my generation, I think younger as well, were raised on Strunk and White's Elements of Style, which is absolutely indispensable little book about prose style. But his own prose style was wonderfully disciplined and spare. And so when E.B. White chooses a detail and puts it in a scene, it's not because he just said, oh, I could say 20 things, I'm just going to choose this one. He doesn't say 20, he chooses the one that matters. And so when we get to the opening of Charlotte's Web, I'm sure all of you know, is a tale about saving the life of a young pig named Wilbur. In the opening scene, there's the smell of bacon in the pan. That's what we smell. We haven't quite yet gotten on board with all that's going to happen in this book, but we know two things. We know from the very first line of the book that there's someone is the father of the current main character. It's going to change to Wilbur in a minute, but the book opens up focused on the experience of Fern, who's an 8-year-old farm girl. We know that her father's just tromped through the kitchen with an axe. Her mother says he's on the way to kill a runt pig, and there's the smell of bacon frying in the pan. What more do you need to know? Think about the sensory world of your setting. How can it help your storytelling? How can it work on your reader's mind, even subliminally, to provide emotional resonance? And again, I'll use my comparison to music. When you're listening to a symphony, it's not that you can hear every distinct note played by every musician. You know, you can't think about you can't sit there and say, I'm listening to the third violin part now. Oh, now I'll listen to the timpani. They work in combination. All of these sounds work in combination. Some of them, in fact, most of them, you're not going to consciously hear, but they work together to create an impact. And even if you're not focused on the boom of the timpani, you can feel it in your belly, right? So think of dimensional writing as having that same symphonic quality. There's a lot going on all the time. The reader may not be consciously aware of everything you're doing, but it will have an impact. You get to be aware of everything you're doing, but the reader doesn't have to be aware. You don't have to hammer it over the head. You don't have to draw everything to their attention. You can put bacon in the pan and just let it go and trust that it's doing its job. It's adding dimension. It's adding its own note to the combination of stuff that's going on. That's how we get rid of the flatness, right? We're layering stuff. So inflect your details with storytelling. That was number 4. Here's number 5. This is a big one. And I say it because I feel that one of the qualities of that sort of flat writing is it can't just stay in one zone for the whole time. Even a writer who doesn't have a huge toolkit of writing craft skills knows that it's some things have to change. And here's the thing that they change. They give us some stuff that's going on inside the protagonist's head, the hero's head, and then they give us some stuff that's going on outside the hero in the scene. And then they go back into the hero's head and they give us some stuff that's going on inside the hero's head. And then they come back out and they give us some stuff that's going on outside in the scene. Less skilled writing pretty much does this, and it can do it for a whole book's worth. And it just toggles back and forth between inside the reader's head, inside the hero's head, and outside the hero's head. Now, this is dull and repetitive. As I said at the top of this talk, it's not that many readers won't slog through it, but it could be so much better, right? So much more could be added. And if you decide to really put the story, as I have been known to say, out where the reader can see it, you will find that you will rely less on having to continually just go back in the reader's head in order to create. Sorry, I keep saying reader, but I mean the protagonist. You will rely less on going back inside the hero's head, that inner monologue of your protagonist, in order to create variety than you would otherwise. Don't get locked into doing that, because what's going on inside your hero's head is largely better expressed by what they are actually doing in the story. So often, this impulse to just toggle back into the hero's head will simply give us a comment or an explanation of what's supposed to be going on in the actual scene. It's repetitive. It's repeating information that we'd be better off just experiencing. And in fact, it actually interrupts the fictional dream, because when you get a scene started and your hero's got something that they're doing, we want to watch it happen. You know, we don't want it to be interrupted. We want to get caught up in it. We want to anticipate the motives of the hero and see what they're going to do about it. What are they going to do to get closer to what they want? We want to watch it happen, right? That's where the storytelling is. If you don't have a lot of skills to create a dynamism and variety, in order to do that in the scene, you may naively say, well, I'll just go back into the hero's head and have them comment on what just happened. And that's a red flag. It's typically a red flag. If the scene makes sense and your hero is acting in accordance with their motives, we don't need to have their commentary also explaining what they're about to do and why they're doing it. Now, I don't know if that rings a bell with anyone, but I'm here to tell you that this is something that I see very, very frequently, and it's it's just a hallmark of not trusting that your storytelling is clear enough so that the reader can follow it without you sneaking into the hero's inner monologue to try to explain what's going on. Just for fun, ask yourself, do I need to get into my hero's head, or am I confident that I can put the story out there where the reader can see it? Another uh, quality that this could be a red flag toward is if your hero is so passive that they're not actually doing that much at all in the scenes. If the scenes are just happening and your hero is neither embodied nor active, but acting as a kind of mini you, right? If the hero is acting as a kind of a substitute writer, that they're just there to observe what's going on so that you, the writer, the real writer, has a way of putting it into words while pretending to be in their point of view. This is something that the writers get stuck in. So here's the instruction. Don't get locked into your hero's world. Put the story out where the reader can see it and find dynamism in the storytelling of the actual scene by knowing what story is being told in that scene, letting your hero be actively driving it forward. They are the ones who are in pursuit of something. This scene has got to do in some way with that hero's through line, through the tale. So we should be on board with what they want. We should know the rules of the game well enough as readers to root for that hero to do the thing that's going to make them the winner at the end, right? So we should know. We shouldn't be wondering what does the hero want. We should be on board with their experience. It's what point of view is all about. So beware of thinking hero. If your hero is thinking all the time and not doing anything in this outside world, then you have it's just a warning sign that you haven't figured out how to be dynamic and include all this variety in the actual scenes, which is where the action of your story should be taking place. Give them something to do. So, all right, very good. And sixth and last, a little cherry on the cupcake of this exploration of different ways you can add dynamics and dimension to your writing. You can use the language itself with an intention toward being dimensional and dynamic. And what do I mean by that? If your sentences don't change their rhythm, don't change their tone, don't change the length of words, don't change their cadence, if your paragraphs are always of just about the same length, if the types of vocabulary that you use doesn't change, if you're stuck in a kind of voice that's very limited and you use it in every scene, you use it in happy scenes, you use it in sad scenes, you use it in scenes of physical peril, and you use it in scenes of happiness and spring, you're not allowing your language, your actual prose, to have dimension. You're not allowing any dynamics in. How can the way your sentences and paragraphs flow, how can the manipulation of words themselves be another level of dynamic, another kind of detail that's inflected with storytelling? If you are always using sentences that have 2 or 3 clauses, no matter what, your hero could be racing at top speed, gasping for breath, running away from bad guys, but your sentences require the lung capacity of an opera singer. They don't get breathless. They don't feel hasty. Nothing ever rushes, right? You're just locked into a way of writing that is not being responsive to the storytelling. So this is a lot of fun to play with. It's really a lot of fun. And again, the writer who is in the flat writing zone probably doesn't even ask themselves this question. They're not really even thinking about it. Mix up your sentence rhythms, mix up the kinds of words you use, mix up the length of paragraphs. You might even mix up the length of chapters. You have to let the full experience that the reader is having work together. These are like all the different instruments and sections in the symphony, and they all have to be playing the same piece. So the passage of time, the movement of distance, the sense of embodiment, both in the hero and in the setting, this rhythm of moving back and forth from the hero's inner life to the outer world, and the treatment of the language itself are like all different sections of the orchestra. And if you're clear and unified and coherent in the experience you want your reader to have, you will find ways to make all of those tools at your disposal work together. And that, my friends, is what we mean by writing in multiple dimensions. That's what I mean by it. It's a lot of writing craft. So forgive me again. Each one of these topics is a whole training. It's a whole training and not easily mastered. But if you know that they exist, and if really what I can hope for this particular talk to give you is a sense of all that there is to know, all of the things that are potentially at your disposal as writers to elevate your work. I want to solve a mystery that many writers struggle with. Because we don't know what we don't know, writers who write without even being aware of all the tools at their disposal uh, toggle between reading stuff that thrills them, makes them feel like, oh, I want to be a writer. That was amazing. I read that book. It changed my life. Now I want to be able to recreate that experience. I want to do that, right? And they sit down to write, and then their own writing is flat. And it clearly does not have that magic. It does not have that same immersive quality, that virtual reality experience in the reader's brain. It doesn't have it, but they don't know why. And they get super frustrated. And they start coming up with explanations like, well, I'm not talented, or I'm not, I don't have the magic thing, or maybe I just need to write more, or, or they think, well, maybe that's just what it feels like. And then they share their work with the world and they don't get any traction. Nobody says this is great. They get passes on stuff, right? They just don't get the response that they want. And the writing is it just has not made a leap to having this more nuanced approach that is the mark of professionalism, is the mark of really good writing. And these are just a half a dozen examples of the kinds of things that a skilled writer is thinking about and putting in. Now, I just want to end with one more note of encouragement to you all, which is you don't sit down to write a draft with all of this in mind. This is not the stuff that you can just do in a first draft without thinking of it at any level of experience. These are all the different writing craft topics that you will bring to bear as you develop your work. A novel is not written, it is developed. It is conceived of, it is drafted, it is revised, it is reorganized, it is revised many more times, and it's given a final polish. There's all kinds of steps in order to get a finished piece of work that looks effortless, that looks like the writer just sat down and went, because it's that effortless quality that we want to give our reader. We want the reader's brain to just surrender, to just give over control, to hand over the controls to the fiction. We want we don't want them to look at the work and say, wow, this was really hard to write. Look how hard this is. Look at all the work that went into this, right? We don't let them see our labor. We don't let them see the 20 drafts. We want them to just get a smooth ride. So we conceal all of that from them, and we're supposed to. And I just want to remind you all that that is the iceberg that's underneath. What the reader sees at the end of our long process of work is the tip of an iceberg of a ton of intention, revision, thinking, writing, craft, story structure, all this stuff. It's very true that you don't know what you don't know. And so I want you to know that all this stuff is there for you. It's all learnable. It's teachable and learnable. You can do all of these things, but you got to know that they're there first. So that is my talk today, my friends. I hope that was interesting for you. Mie, delighted to see you here. I'm going to check over in the comments and see anybody's got any particular questions. You are very welcome for the advice, and I do hope it was a benefit. So I'm here every Wednesday at 1 p.m., and I always look forward to these talks. If there's any subject matter or any question that you have that you would like me to address in a future live stream, leave it in the comments below, because I love your suggestions. And it's really great to hear what's going on with you. And I want to send a special invitation to anyone who's in like NaNoWriMo craziness right now. If you're getting stuck, if there's something that we can do to help you out on one of these Wednesdays, that we've got a couple left in November, give me a holler and we'll put it on the calendar. Okay. Have a wonderful week till next time we meet, my dear storytellers, and happy writing to you all.